It's Thursday on Daily Delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Hope you guys are having a great day out there as well. A lot to get to on today's show. Randy Johnson from the Tribune joins me here in just a few minutes to talk all things hockey. Gophers men's hockey team has a big series this weekend against Michigan. Gopher women's hockey team is in the WCHA playoffs. The Wild have a big game if they're going to cling to any sort of playoff hopes. With the trade deadline just a little over a week away, they play Nashville in Nashville tonight, a team they're chasing in the standings and losing sight of quickly after Nashville's been hot and the Wild lost the other night. So lots of hockey talk with Randy Johnson here in just a little bit. Have a Vikings thought towards the end of the show as well about Brian Flores and some things that Kevin O'Connell said about how happy he is to have his defensive coordinator back for a second year and what that will mean for the Vikings this year. First, though, what did I miss? It's all basketball at the jump, and that means it's all Caitlin Clark at the very, very jump. Iowa women's basketball star lights up Williams Arena on Wednesday. We've been waiting for it. It's kind of one of those things where you have a lot of anticipation for something, right? You know Caitlin Clark, this amazing basketball player, is coming here. The game's been sold out for months. She's this national spectacle, national superstar. She's been playing, phenomenal basketball all season. And so you're like, okay, can the reality live up to the hype? Is it really going to be a special night? As it turns out, it is. Caitlin Clark goes for 33 points, 12 assists, 10 rebounds, a triple-double in just 29 minutes of action. Iowa absolutely blasts the Gophers 108-60. I've got three main points I want to make off this game. Obviously, number one, the greatness of Caitlin Clark. She passes Lynette Woodard on the all-time Division I scoring list. She is now the all-time Division I leader. She had broken the NCAA mark a week or so ago. Now she breaks the Division I record, goes back even before NCAA took over women's basketball. And some interesting things that went along with that. One, a lot of people upset that Peacock, which broadcast the game, didn't mention Caitlin Clark breaking Lynette Woodard's record when it happened in the moment. It happened late in what happened with the shot that she made her final points on to get to 33. But they did not mention that, nor did they ask her about it post game. Now, Caitlin Clark and Lisa Bluter, the Iowa head coach, were certainly asked about it post-game, and they had some interesting thoughts, basically saying the NCAA didn't want to recognize this record. They're trying to ignore it. Here first is Lisa Bluter, Iowa head coach, on this subject.
Tonight is the night of the real record. To me, for the AIAW record that Lynette Woodard held, that was the real one. For some reason, the NCAA does not want to recognize the basketball that was played prior to 1982, and that's wrong. We played basketball back then. They just don't want to recognize it, and that hurts the rest of us that were playing at that time. There's no reason why that should not be the true record. And, at a school like Iowa that has been so rich in AIAW history, I just want to make sure we acknowledge Lynette's accomplishments in the game of basketball. But congratulations to Caitlin for being the true basketball leader in points tonight. She was extraordinary tonight, I believe. She had triple-double to go with her points. 12 assists. As a team, we had 30 assists on 12 turnovers, so we passed the ball really well tonight. And when we do that, we can be dangerous.
Love that answer, right? Because basketball is basketball. Like the men's records that existed a long time ago when NCAA was still sanctioning men's basketball, those are recognized. Those are always brought up. It doesn't matter how long ago it was. Just because Woodard played before the NCAA was sanctioning basketball doesn't mean it wasn't basketball back then. So Caitlin Clark was asked about it as well. She gave a similar answer to her head coach, Lisa Bluter. Here is Caitlin Clark after the game.
Super cool, like Coach Bluter said, is the NCAA didn't want to recognize women and what they did back in the 1980s. I think it just speaks to the foundation that these players have laid for us to have opportunities to be able to play in environments like this, in front of crowds like this. So I wouldn't have the opportunity to be able to do what I'm doing every single night if it wasn't for people like her. And obviously there's so many great players across the board. So I'm just really thankful and grateful to have those people that have come before me. It's super special. obviously she's one of the best all time, could certainly score the ball. But I think it just shows, Title IX is not that long ago. 50 years is not that long ago. And I think it just still shows the room that we have to improve, and where women's sports is going is a really great place.
So the bottom line now is Clark has scored more points than any women's basketball player in Division I history, regardless of era, regardless of who is sanctioning the games at the time. Just a phenomenal player. She's only 17 points shy now of Pete Maravich's all-time men's or women's scoring record. She should break that, you would imagine, probably in her next game with the rate she scores at. Just a phenomenon, right? She sold out Williams Arena, lots of Iowa fans in the stands, curious Gophers fans, things like that. Makes you wonder what's in store, and I'll get to that here in just a little bit. But the second point I want to make is, as much as this night was about a celebration of Caitlin Clark, about a coronation of her passing this record, about just celebrating her greatness, I can't help but be disappointed in the Gophers right now. 108-60. I know they're missing Mara Braun. I know they're missing Sophie Hart. And Lisa Bluta, the Iowa head coach, even tried to give them some grace. Here she was after the game talking about the challenges they have faced this season.
Dawn has been dealt a tough hand. When you lose Mara Braun and you lose Sophie Hart, those are two really good players. And so, I feel for her, because that is a really tough situation that she's been dealt, especially as a first-year coach here.
That was kind of her, and it's true, but still, 108-60. That score bothers me. I think it bothered Dawn Plitzowite, the Gophers head coach, too, because this was a team that before Mara Braun got hurt was trending towards an NCAA tournament appearance. They've only won one game since then. Their season has gone completely off the rails. 15-13 overall, but 5-12 in the Big Ten. Just a disappointing way this season has gone. And again, I know you take away probably your two best players or two of your best players, certainly your one best player, Mara Braun, and then Sophie Hart got hurt later on in that stretch. You take them away, you take away your two top players from any lineup, you're going to struggle. I still don't feel like that gives you the license or gives you the latitude to lose a game 108-60 on your home court. It was closer earlier this year in Iowa. I think the score was like 94-71. Everybody has a hard time stopping Caitlin Clark. I get it. Everybody has a hard time stopping this high-powered, excellent Iowa offense. They're one of the best teams in the country. Still, I'm disappointed with the way this season has finished for the Gophers, and I feel like there's a lot of regrouping to be done in the offseason, even with the injuries they have had, and even with the grace that they have been extended by some of these other coaches coming in who are beating the Gophers right now. Final thought on that, which both is a Caitlin Clark and a Gophers thought. Big Ten tournament's here in just a couple weeks. It's going to be quite the Caitlin Clark show again. I mean, they'll be here again. Iowa will be here again. That whole tournament sold out. You imagine the Caitlin Clark effect has a big part of that. Should be an amazing thing. She will almost certainly have broken Pete Maravich's record by that point, and we'll see just more of the same, more of this kind of dominance of women's basketball in this market, in this state, in this country right now. And that should be an amazing experience to see her come back again. I don't think people will be tired of it. I think it'll be like, wow, here she comes again. It's going to be a fascinating, fun thing. For the Gophers, it's a chance to regroup, but yeah, it's really too bad, because with the tournament here this year, men's tournament here as well, men's Big Ten tournament here as well, a chance to really make some noise, showcase yourself, and that just does not happen so far this year for the Gophers ever since Mara Braun's injury. Now, Dawn Plitzowite might want to have some joint practices with Ben Johnson's men's Gophers team. Maybe they can both learn a little defense. Ben Johnson's Gophers lose 105-97 to Illinois on Wednesday night, the same night the Gophers played Iowa in women's basketball. Now, again, that game was closer. That was kind of a track meet, up and down all the way. Gophers were competitive in that game. Dawson Garcia, a lot of points, but 105, the Gophers give up. The women give up 108. Defense optional. That is disappointing right now, because the Gophers men, they need all the wins they can get. Illinois, one of the best teams in the country, just like Iowa. They're in the top 20, so that was a tough ask of them regardless. But You've got to do better than that at this time of year. You've got to have a better defensive effort this time of year because you are trying to win every game. Probably means the Gophers, barring some sort of long Big Ten tournament run, need to win out in these final 3 Big Ten games to have a realistic chance at the NCAA tournament. We were talking about that just a couple games ago. Hey, the opportunity here. You got Nebraska on the road. You got Illinois on the road. One more road game against Northwestern, which is playing really well too. And then home games against Penn State and Indiana. Winnable games. All of these games, winnable games. But you've got to be able to execute and compete and play better defensively, which they just did not do enough of Wednesday. So really puts Ben Johnson's team behind the 8 ball. Really means they have to probably win out and then win at least 1, maybe 2 games in the Big Ten tournament. Season has been a success no matter what, I would still say, just because of where they were last year, what the projections were, but a chance to take a season from improved to special still exists, but they have to be better down the stretch. And finally, a team that has not had a problem playing defense this year. Timberwolves. They beat the Memphis Grizzlies 110-101. Anthony Edwards puts the clamps down on Jaren Jackson Jr., who was red hot for Memphis, had made this a more competitive game than the Wolves might have liked. Really turned momentum in the second half. Wolves win. Anthony Edwards has 34 points. He is a star on both ends of the court in this game. The larger takeaway from this, the Wolves are 42-17 now. 42-17. 42. If that stands out to you, that's the number of games they won all last season. This is the kind of year they hoped they would have last year, but last year was a slog, a grind. 42-40 was the final product. And Karl Anthony Towns hurt for most of last season. Rudy Gobert wasn't himself. Everybody looked upset, angry, annoyed with each other a lot of points last year. Jaden McDaniels punched a wall right before the playoffs started. Rudy Gobert tried to punch Kyle Anderson. I mean, you remember all that, right? This was not a fun thing last year. Everything has gone complete 180 on this team to the point now where they have 25 games left in the season. They've already won as many as they did last year, winning in a lot of different ways, but defense has been the constant for them this season. Got it done again in this game. And now we'll see kind of how these last 25 games go, right? How much do they want to get this number 1 seed in the West? How much does that matter to them versus making sure some guys are getting some rest, things like that? One thing that's continued in the last few games, Monty Morris, their trade deadline acquisition, giving Mike Conley much needed lower minutes in some of these games, played really well again the other night. He's just a solid veteran point guard. Even without Kyle Anderson in the lineup, they've got enough ball handling now where they can, kind of give Mike Conley more of that time off. That's going to be essential as the playoffs roll around. So you got to like where this team is at right now, and you have to love the fact that they have 42 wins with 25 games left after winning 42 all of last year, and still, by the way, being a playoff team a year ago.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino. Let your story begin.
Let's bring in Randy Johnson from the Star Tribune. I want to talk hockey. It's almost March, Randy, and it sure feels like it with all the high-level hockey going on. Well, I want to talk to you about the Gophers, talk a little bit about the Wild. We got the high school hockey tournament coming up next weekend. The PWHL is in full swing. They just played at Mariucci the other night. There's a lot of hockey going on right now.
Yeah, it is. If you like the sport with the rubber disc there, you're in your wheelhouse right now. And March, as you well know, Mike, that March starts in mid-February.
It does.
And go through mid-April for us in the newspaper business.
It does indeed. It does indeed. And that's okay. We like games. We like to see these teams in action. Gopher men's hockey. I want to start there, Randy, because this is their last regular season series. I'm sorry, this is their last regular season series against Michigan this weekend. Maybe you can frame it up for me, because the way I look at it, Michigan seems like they have more at stake. They're 14 in the pairwise right now. The Gophers are 8, but still, you want to A, go into the postseason with momentum, and B, be thinking about, hey, can we get a a 2 seed in the tournament as opposed to dropping into a 3. How do you frame up this last series?
Yeah, definitely there, Mike. Yeah, it's a big one. They were off last weekend, so they were able to heal if they had any wounds, and basically just they coming off that Notre Dame series where they got hammered in the first game, came back strong in the second. It's just about getting their game in good shape for the postseason, and Michigan, will be a team that's got some desperation in them. They're 14 the pairwise, which right now is right on the cut line. They would be in most likely, but if you get upsets in those conference tournaments, then if you're in the at 13 or 14 in there, you could get sniped and then end up not in the tournament. So Michigan wants to bolster their credentials too. And the Gophers, they're at number 8, so they would be right now a number 2 seed, but that's something they would like to cement. You'd like to get up a little bit higher in that 2 band if you can get in the the 5-6 range if you could.
What happened in that opener a couple weeks ago against Notre Dame? Did we just jinx Justin Close? What happened in that game?
No, I think it wasn't so much Justin. It was more just they didn't get rewarded. They were playing pretty well first period, didn't get rewarded. I think they got their daubers down a little bit, and basically Notre Dame came out with a lot more desperation and played a lot crisper game and just played better. Sometimes you'll get a clunker like that. I'm sure there was the Gophers, would like to think that that's an anomaly there, that they, maybe got a bad game out of their system, but they did come back stronger the next game. It's not something you want to see necessarily, but you'd rather get it out of the way if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, you don't want that in March as opposed to, February. You still got some game. I mean, that's what makes postseason college hockey so hard. Like, you have a clunker at the wrong time of the year, your season's over. It's not best of 7 like the pro leagues. You have a clunker, you're done.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The only best of is the best of 3 opening round in conference tournaments, and after that, it's all one and done. Which it gets you ready for the NCAA's. But you want to get any loss out of your system before Selection Sunday. That's for sure.
So that Selection Sunday will be in not too long. It'll be into March, and then they'll play, obviously the road to the Frozen Four, it leads to St. Paul. There's always motivation every year, but like we've talked about, that is added motivation. I think I noticed the other day when I was looking this up that with the last 3 times the NCAA Frozen Four has been at XL, a Minnesota team has won, and that was the Gophers once and UMD twice, but the home ice can carry you pretty far, especially when you have a really good team like the Gophers have this year.
Yeah, it's a nice carrot to have there to shoot for. I mean, every time that it's been at the X, it's Minnesota team has won. I'm sure the Gophers would like to continue that. I mean, I'm sure there's other Minnesota teams here too that would like to get there also.
Absolutely. Let's shift gears a little bit to the Wild. That Gopher series this weekend against Michigan at Mariucci, so plenty of opportunity to go catch them. And then obviously March, things will ramp up even more. But let's talk Wild, because you were over there the other night. They lost to Carolina 3-2. I mean, this time of year, I feel like this happens a lot with the Wild, where they have a stretch of the year where they have a slump. This year they've had 2 or 3 of those, especially at the start of the year. They've been in desperation mode for months. Like, they've been in a mode where you lose a game, you feel like you lose ground. That was one where Carolina's a solid team, but you're up 2-1 on your home ice after the first period. You would like to get a better result than 3-2.
Yeah, basically it was tough. They basically a couple bad turnover situations or bad bounces, I guess I would put it. One was a turnover that led to the tying goal. Basically, Declan Chisholm trying to dump a puck in and hits Matt Boldy. Karams sends Carolina on a 2-on-1. They score 25 seconds left in the period to tie it at 2-2. The second bad bounce for the Wild came. They had just killed off a power play, and Carolina got a shot off, hits off Philip Gustafsson blocker, then caroms off the visor of a Carolina player who was right by the goal, and pops in. Turns out to be the winner. That's hockey. Sometimes it's sometimes you get those, sometimes you don't. But yeah, it's been a kind of Wild had been playing pretty well. They had a 7-1-1 stretch.
Right.
Before that, they after Saturday night's win at Seattle, they were 2 points out of a playoff spot. Well, since then, Nashville's red hot. They've won 2 more since then. They've won 6 in a row. So they're 6 points up on the Wild for that last spot. Basically, the Wild is battle. Also, you have St. Louis and Calgary just ahead of them that they're battling with. So you can do a lot of good things, but one loss can really set you back this time of year. It's just you just got to be sharp. And the other thing about that too is that 4 of their last 5 losses have been 1-goal losses in which they've had the lead in either the second or third period. So you want to be closing those games out. Right there's 7 points. One of those games is overtime, so it was 7 points that they missed out on if they could have held on.
Well, and you mentioned Nashville and St. Louis. That's their next 2 games, right? Road games on Thursday and Saturday. I mean, those feel like, it's too late to say, or too early, I'm sorry, to say make or break, but you lose those games. You lose a 4-point game to Nashville, and suddenly you're 8 back of Nashville. The math starts to get hard, and you got the trade deadline a little over a week from now. Like, you start to think, does one thing or another in the next few games, spur Bill Guerin in one direction or the other? I know they got a ton of guys with the no moves, but they've got some moves they can make in either direction. I got to think these will be some defining games for that.
Yeah, definitely there. Yeah, that trade deadline is limited. If they would happen to drop these 2, then it might make the GM think a little bit differently. You could see guys like a guy like Brendan Duhaime or Connor Dewar, guys that would be
the Deweys.
The Deweys. One's going to be unrestricted, one to be restricted free agent. So a situation where if they are looking to open up roster spots for guys in the farm for younger guys next year, that they still have one more year of that salary cap $15 million hit. So the cheaper they can go is the better if they have similar productivity out of those spots.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what their direction is right now, because I feel like they did such a good job those first couple years after the buyouts. The year immediately after the cap hit wasn't so bad, but they set a franchise record for points that year, the 21-22 season. Then last year they come back strong again. They make the postseason again. They have a decent series. They get there. They're at least in the mix. But now you're looking at it and they're like, where exactly are they going with where they're at right now? It's just kind of hard for me to kind of feel like, what is next year going to look like? I feel like they kind of have to sort that out for themselves before they're clear of all of these cap hurdles where they can make different moves at a certain point.
Yeah, I think roster wise, you'll see some changes, but with all the no move contracts that he has there, it's going to be tough to make wholesale changes. So you're in a way stuck with a lot of what you have now. I think that there's what they have is shown better than it has for good chunks of this season. Yeah. So I would expect a bit more of a bounce back, but that cap hit, it does take a toll out, especially when you add them year after year after year.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you think about it, it's, $14-15 million. It's like, hey, that's, 2 $7.5 million players or 3 $5 million players. Like those guys, those would be, top 4 defensemen. Those would be top 6 forwards in a lot of cases that they're just missing out on right now. So it's definitely, Guerin doesn't use it as an excuse, but it definitely is impacting them. And I'm curious to see not just how the rest of this year goes, but how things shake out, for the 24-25 season as well, before they're kind of clear of all that. And then, right after they get clear of that, you're going to have to worry about an extension for Kaprizov. So it's an interesting time for the Wild.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You see where they've loaded up that top line with Eriksson, Boldy, and Kaprizov. Well, if you had that money from the cap, you could probably have another pretty highly productive line too, with a couple bigger money guys on it. So it's they are hamstrung a bit. They're cobbling together. This year is one where it sure looks like that cap hit coupled with some injuries, coupled with some lackluster play at times has really come down and hurt the team.
Royal Credit Union's Smart Checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union Smart Checking account online at rcu.org/go-checking. Insured by NCUA.
Yep, absolutely. Well, let's switch back to colleges for a minute before we go. Go for women's hockey. They have the WCHA playoffs this weekend. They're hosting Mankato, trying to get to the Final Five face-off. This is a program we kind of take for granted. It's maybe the wrong word, but there's sustained excellence. You just kind of come to expect they'll be there at this time of year, but they're rolling again this year. It's just no surprise, but I don't want that to go unnoticed.
Yeah, they're it's been an interesting year. It's a year of transition a bit for them. They lose players like Taylor Heisey and Grace Lumwinkle now playing for the PWHL Minnesota team. Basically, yeah, it's a bit of a retooling year, but they still do have probably the best player in the nation, I would say, in Abby Murphy, leading goal scorer in the nation. Just a joy to watch. She's a feisty character. Not afraid to mix things up a little bit. Not afraid to rankle some opponents a little bit. Against Minnesota Duluth last weekend, she scores an empty net goal, does a slap shot with it, and kind of like what happened up in Toronto. And a Duluth player took exception a little bit, gave her a little bit of a shove. So Abby Murphy definitely keeps things interesting over there.
Absolutely, and they're 5 in the pairwise right now, so they're feeling pretty good about their status. But again, a chance to move up or down based on how they do in the conference playoffs before they get to NCAA play. Well, Randy, appreciate it as always. Glad to talk hockey with you anytime, anywhere, and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Appreciate it. Good
stuff from Randy. As always, follow his Gophers hockey coverage, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. Nobody loves hockey as much as Randy, so love to talk about that with him on this show. I'm glad we got a little Wild talk in there as well, because it is a big game tonight in Nashville. If they lose this one, especially in regulation, and fall that far back, you could start to see the beginning of the end and maybe some moves, like I said, at the trade deadline, which is coming up just a little over a week from now. Don't know where it's all headed, don't know where it's all going, but not too much of a leap on leap day to think that they would be maybe thinking about making some trades, even with all those no-move clauses, maybe making some trades of the guys they can deal if they don't, move up in the standings really quickly here. Let us finish with the cooler. Interesting story from Ben Gessling today, Vikings writer. And by the way, I'll have our colleague Andrew Kramer on Friday's show to talk more Vikings from the NFL Scouting Combine. You can listen to an Access Vikings podcast that Ben and Andrew did from Indianapolis the other day. Check that one out. But Andrew and I will be on Friday to talk about all the things that have happened so far this week. Vikings talking about, Kirk Cousins, talking about some of the other free agents, Justin Jefferson, talking about that extension. Lots of things have happened in the combine. And by the way, they're also scouting these players they maybe hope to draft coming up here. So lots of Viking stuff from the combine, and Andrew and I will get to a lot of that. But interesting story from Ben on Brian Flores and just how Kevin O'Connell talking about his defensive coordinator, talking about how he thought Flores might get some head coaching looks this offseason, but really didn't. Thinking part of that was probably because the defense faded down the stretch a bit here. They were top 5, top 10 in a lot of categories for a while, but then had a rough finish, gave up a bunch of points, finished more middle of the pack and a lot of stuff. But that defense, he overachieved with that defense, and I was a little surprised too that he maybe didn't get some looks. It's good for the Vikings in the short term, though. Even if it's not great for Brian Flores, who I'm sure would love to be a head coach again someday after being the Dolphins head coach previous to this. It's great for the Vikings. This is obviously the guy they want leading their defense. Obviously the guy who was, led the more stable side of the ball for much of 2023. I mean, even when everybody was healthy for the Vikings, it was the defense that was keeping them in games more so than the offense. And I think Flores absolutely deserves another chance. It's pretty interesting to think about, O'Connell is secure enough, obviously, to have a former head coach on his staff. You could imagine, I don't think this is going to happen. I wouldn't imagine this is going to happen, but if things ever went sideways here and Flores was still on the staff, he would be a natural to take over as an interim. But I'm not really thinking about that right now. I'm more thinking about year 2 with Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator, steps they can take, guys they can bring back. And Ben Story made an interesting point about how if Flores does leave for a head coaching job after this season, the Vikings will get 2 third-round picks as compensation because of an NFL rule, reading from Ben Story, passed in 2021 that rewards teams for advancing minority coach or GM candidates. They'd have to be with the team for 2 years to trigger those compensation picks. So now that Flores presumably will have had 2 years here, if he leaves after this year, the Vikings will get a nice little draft haul from that. I'd love to see Flores here for a long time. I think he's great. I think he's done wonders for the defense so far. I think he's going to have to come up with some new stuff in year 2 because teams are maybe starting to figure a little bit of the stuff out at the end of last year, and the personnel just didn't really add up to success by the end. A lot of questions on defense, though. Can they re-sign Daniil Hunter? What about DJ Wanham? Is Harrison Smith coming back? Can they add talent at all these levels? They have so many needs and not that many draft picks. It's just a fascinating offseason. And again, like I said, Andrew Kramer and I will talk about plenty of that on Friday's show as well. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Leap Day. These only come around once every 4 years, so enjoy it. If anybody out there has a Leap Day birthday, happy birthday to those who celebrate every 4 years. We'll talk to you again on Friday.